Welcome back to CrimePod Castle, everyone. Ready for another deep dive with me? We're taking a look at a case that, really shook India back in 2022.
This one is definitely going to stay with you.
Oh, absolutely.
It's got twists and turns and still so many questions even now.
Right. Episode 48, and we're still unpacking unsolved mysteries, and this one takes us to Uttarakhand, India.
Beautiful place, but the story is anything but.
It's the disappearance of Ankita Bhandari. A 19-year-old just vanishes from this luxury resort.
And as you start digging, you realize it's more than a simple missing person case.
So much more.
It gets into possible betrayal whispers of corruption and a family just desperate for answers.
Yeah, and it really shines light on bigger issues in India, too.
Absolutely, especially the safety of young women trying to make their own way.
Okay, so before we get into the actual disappearance, let's talk about Ankita herself. Who was she?
Well, everyone describes her as really bright and ambitious,
Driven.
Exactly. She wanted to be independent financially, and this job at the resort was part of that.
And her family was behind her all the way.
Totally supportive, which makes the whole thing even more tragic.
It really does. So it's September 18th, 2022. Ankita is last seen leaving work at this resort. And here's the thing. The resort is owned by Pulkit Arya.
And his father. Pretty powerful political figure.
Oh, yeah, that detail becomes huge in the case later on.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about, influence.
Right away you think, could things get swept under the rug?
Exactly. But even before Ankita vanishes, there are signs that something's off.
Like, what do you mean?
She had confided in her friends, texting them saying she felt unsafe at work.
Wait, she said that? Directly?
Yeah, and that she felt pressured by her employer. Those messages become really important later.
They give us a look into what she was thinking those last few days.
Chilling to read, knowing what we know now.
Makes you think if someone had acted on those messages.
Ugh, yeah, what if? So Ankita doesn't come home that night. Parents are frantic naturally, and they go to the police.
And what happens?
There are delays. Delays in filing the missing person report.
Ugh, that's always so suspicious.
Right. Was it just red tape, or was someone trying to protect someone powerful? Those are the questions that really fueled public anger around this case.
Yeah, I bet. Those first few hours of an investigation are critical.
Crucial. And it makes you think, could Ankita have been found safe if they'd acted faster?
That's the question that haunts this whole case, right? And as public pressure builds, the investigation finally starts to pick up steam.
Like they had to do something.
Exactly. Pulkit Arya, remember him, the resort owner? He and two of his associates are brought in for questioning.
Yeah, the questioning starts.
Yeah.
And almost right away, their stories start falling apart.
It's like a house of cards.
Totally. Their alibis just didn't add up at all.
What were they even saying?
Initially, they tried to claim that Ankita had left the resort, voluntarily after some kind of disagreement. But
come on.
It didn't line up with what witnesses were saying at all.
And even more importantly, it didn't match up with Ankita's own messages. Remember those? The ones where she said she was being pressured and felt unsafe.
Those messages really blow their whole story out of the water. I mean, why would she just walk away from the situation, especially knowing what she was telling her friends?
Exactly. It makes no sense. And then 5 days after Ankita disappears comes the news everyone was dreading.
Her body is found.
Right. In a canal near the resort.
Just devastating. And tragically, it confirmed what so many people had feared. The autopsy showed that Ankita had been assaulted before she was pushed into the canal.
This was not an accident.
No, someone took her life.
Yeah.
And as the investigation goes on, this possible motive starts to emerge. And it is so disturbing.
Tell me about it.
It came out that Ankita had been resisting these inappropriate demands from Pulkit Arya.
Like, what kind of demands?
Well, allegedly, he wanted her to entertain VIP guests at the resort.
Oh, wow.
And when she refused, well, it led to this confrontation.
Which ultimately,
Exactly. And it just adds this whole other layer to the case.
Yeah.
The power dynamics, the exploitation that young women, especially in these kinds of service industries, face.
It's awful. And her refusal to comply, her courage to stand up for herself, it seems like that's what sealed her fate.
Just tragic. And, in Ankita's case, it really resonated with a lot of people in India.
Understandably so.
It sparked these huge protests across the country. People demanding justice, not just for Ankita, but for all women who face these kinds of threats.
It became a symbol.
Right, it did. It forced this national conversation about women's safety, the exploitation of young workers, and the corruption that can protect the powerful.
There was this overwhelming sense that justice was being delayed, maybe even denied because of who was involved.
It really felt like a turning point. Like people had had enough. The government under immense pressure, they respond by demolishing parts of the resort.
Really?
Yeah. But a lot of people saw that as just a gesture, not really addressing the bigger issues.
I can see that. While the demolition might have appeased some anger in the short term, it doesn't get to the root of the problem.
Exactly. The power imbalance is the lack of protection for workers. And even with arrests made in the case, there are still so many questions.
That's what's so frustrating. You have arrests, you have a potential motive, but there are these gaps in our understanding.
We're left wondering, was this just a powerful man silencing someone who defied him? Or is there something more?
Right. There are other theories out there that make it even more complicated.
Some people believe that Ankita might have stumbled onto something bigger than just a personal conflict with Pulkit Arya.
Oh, wow.
Like maybe she saw something she wasn't supposed to see.
That's a chilling thought. Could her death have been intended not just to silence her, but to protect a whole network of people involved in illegal activities?
It's terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
And then there's the theory that focuses on the systemic failures.
Mm-hmm.
The police delays, the potential corruption, the influence of powerful figures.
That's a whole other angle.
It highlights how easily those in power can exploit and silence the vulnerable.
It makes you question the institutions that are supposed to be protecting people like Ankita.
Did they fail her? And if so, why? Was it incompetence, negligence, or something more deliberate?
Tough questions. And then you have the immense grief of Ankita's family.
Oh, yeah. They've been so strong in their pursuit of justice. But it's impossible to imagine the pain of losing a daughter, a sister, under such horrific circumstances. It's hard not to feel for them, right?
Mm.
This whole story, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But even in the midst of all this tragedy, there's this glimmer of hope, I think, wouldn't you say?
I agree. It's like Ankita's case became this catalyst for change,
Yeah.
All these calls for stricter regulations in the hospitality industry, better protections for young workers, a more robust system for holding people accountable, especially when it comes to crimes against women.
Like even in death, she's making a difference.
Her courage, her refusal to be silenced, it resonates.
It really does.
Ooh.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ankita's story, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the biggest one has got to be the power of speaking out,
Like Ankita did.
Exactly. Her messages to her friends, her trying to raise the alarm about what was going on, those were crucial.
It's so important to feel safe enough to speak up, right?
Absolutely. Without fear of what will happen if you do, we need to create that kind of environment everywhere.
Everywhere. In our workplaces, our communities, even our families. We need to support those who are brave enough to speak out.
It's about being vigilant, looking out for each other.
And remembering that cases like Ankita's, they're not isolated incidents.
Right. It's a symptom of a much bigger problem, a systemic issue that needs constant attention and action.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by these stories and feel like there's nothing we can do.
But that's not true.
No, we can stay informed, we can support the organizations fighting for change, and we can hold our leaders accountable.
To create a safer and more just world for everyone.
Justice for Ankita isn't just about finding those responsible for her death. It's about creating a world where these tragedies are less likely to happen in the first place.
Couldn't said it better myself.
Well, this has been a heavy topic, but so important to discuss. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the unsolved mystery of Ankita Bhandari's disappearance.
Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle for more deep dives into India's most haunting mysteries. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, stay vigilant.